Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC 266 is this Saturday, and it is a great fight card stacked from top to bottom with amazing fights. And in the feature fight on the main card, we are getting Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler 2, a rematch 17 years in the making. That's just insane. I don't think this has ever happened before, and I don't think it will ever happen again. And I cannot wait for this fight, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for that fight. And I believe that there is an X factor that nobody is talking about right now. This was widely known just a couple months ago, but I have not seen anybody recently talking about this. And I think it makes a big difference in making a prediction for this fight. So, first off, let's look back at their first fight. Robbie Lawler and Nick Diaz originally fought at UFC 47 all the way back in 2004. And this was an absolute insane fight, back and forth. Nick Diaz was outstriking, hitting him with that classic Diaz 1-2, rocked him a couple times, but Robbie Lawler was swinging back, landed a couple hard punches as well, landed a flying knee at one point and busted Nick Diaz's nose open. And eventually, Nick Diaz landed a punch and KO'd Robbie Lawler face down in the second round. It was a crazy, wild fight. Nick Diaz was 20 years old at this point in time. Robbie Lawler was 22. And since that fight, both guys have gone on to do amazing things. And when you look at Nick Diaz, what has he gone on and done since then? He became the Strikeforce champion, won quite a few fights in Strikeforce, crazy performances. He had that Pride performance against Takanori Gomi, which is still legendary to this day. And then he finally came back to the UFC all the way back in 2011. And this was one of the first times I saw him fight live. And he was originally supposed to fight GSP for the welterweight title. The UFC had bought Strikeforce. They were bringing in the Strikeforce welterweight champion, and they were going to let him fight the UFC welterweight champion, which was George St. Pierre at the time. Well, Nick Diaz, in classic Nick Diaz fashion, doesn't show up for some pre-fight pressers, and the UFC decides, okay, Nick Diaz, you're no longer fighting George St. Pierre. Carlos Condit is, and now you're going to fight Bj Penn in the co-main event. And George St. Pierre ended up pulling out of that fight, and the main event ended up being Nick Diaz versus Bj Penn, and he just battered Bj Penn. This was towards the downslope of Bj Penn's career, and Nick Diaz just whooped him badly. Eye was badly closed. He just beat him up. Then he went on to fight Carlos Condit at UFC 143 in 2012, and this was for the interim welterweight title. GSP had tore his ACL, was going to be out for a while, whatever. And this fight was very controversial because Carlos Condit kind of backed away the whole time. Nick Diaz kind of walked him down, but Carlos Condit was landing shots, backing up. Carlos Condit got the unanimous decision win, but most people thought that Nick Diaz won. I thought Condit should have got the decision. It was very close, but Condit was just backing up the whole time, but he was landing shots and avoiding shots. Then, even coming off a loss, and this shows you what kind of star power Nick Diaz has, coming off that loss, George St. Pierre said, you know what, I still want to fight Nick Diaz. So he fought Nick Diaz at UFC 158, and he beat Nick Diaz. The Diaz brothers, and I love the Diaz brothers. I don't want anyone to say you're a Diaz brother hater. Their weakness has always been their takedown defense, and sometimes they've been able to compensate with their jiu-jitsu and their submission skills. But when you're fighting a guy like George St. Pierre, if you cannot stop the takedown, you're in for a terrible night. He got dominated by George St. Pierre. I think George St. Pierre won every single round of that fight. And then Nick Diaz did not fight for a while. He sat out for about 2 years, and then he came back with an absolute insane fight against Anderson Silva. Nobody saw this fight coming. Nick Diaz moved up to middleweight. Anderson Silva was coming back after a leg break against Chris Weidman. And this fight was strange because Anderson Silva had never fought someone who was willing to taunt him. And so it seemed like Anderson Silva was scared to strike or tentative to strike. Nick Diaz couldn't really find his rhythm at all. Anderson Silva won that fight, but ended up testing positive for something, and now it's currently a no contest. And that was his last fight in the UFC, January 31st of 2015, 6 years ago, over 6 years ago at this point in time, which is just insane. So he takes a 6-year layoff, and now he's coming back. And also, Nick Diaz in that Anderson Silva fight tested positive for marijuana, and the Athletic Commission wanted to ban him for life. I think they eventually settled on a 5-year suspension. Nick Diaz fought it. I think he won, had it slightly reduced, but it didn't matter anyway because obviously he sat out for this long anyway. And Nick Diaz is just a fan favorite. I love Nick Diaz. I have his autographed bobblehead sitting behind me here. You guys probably can't see it. but he's been talked about since that fight with Anderson Silva. When is Nick Diaz going to return? Who are we going to see him return against? Every year it seems like, will Nick Diaz return this year? They're always asking Dana White. And I know exactly why. First off, Nick Diaz and Nate Diaz have a very unique personality. They seem like real guys. They speak their minds, and they're just different. They stand up. So they garner a lot of fans' attention. And then you look at their fighting styles. Nick Diaz is super durable. He has stamina to go 20 rounds if need be. He'll taunt his opponent. He has great striking. He has good jiu-jitsu and submissions. So what's not to love? And you know, Nate gets that as well. Nate has all those same attributes. And I think this might actually be the biggest fight on UFC 266. From my perspective, I love the main event most, but I'm very excited for this fight too, and I think it will help sell a lot of pay-per-views. So what has Robbie Lawler did since their original fight? He went off to Strikeforce, did a few things, eventually came back to the UFC when the UFC purchased Strikeforce as well, and he was an absolute killer upon returning. And by the way, Robbie Lawler is one of my absolute favorite fighters. I have his autograph, but I'm not picking this fight based on who's my favorite fighter because I love both guys. I'm picking based on the facts that I have. I'm trying to give you guys what I'm looking at. If you look at Robbie Lawler, he came in and had some savage performances, eventually gets a vacant title shot against Johnny Hendricks, loses a close decision, then goes on an absolute crazy streak, destroying Jake Ellenberger, Matt Brown, before getting a rematch with Johnny Hendricks and wins the welterweight title. Then he goes on to have some of the best fights in the welterweight division ever. He goes on to have that insane fight with Rory McDonald, one of my favorite fights of all time. Then he goes on to fight Carlos Condit, crazy fight. Then he goes on to defend his belt against Tyron Woodley, and that's when he gets brutally KO'd by Tyron Woodley. Then he gets a win over Donald Cerrone, and now he's lost 4 in a row since then. And Robbie Lawler has lost 5 out of his last 6, which is just insane. His only win since 2016 against Tyron Woodley when he lost the belt is against Donald Cerrone. So that's not a very good record. But I want to look at the guys he's fighting. Rafael Dos Anjos is a great fighter. Ben Askren, that fight was weird. Robbie Lawler probably should have got the stoppage early in the fight, but Herb Dean was just willing to let Ben Askren die in there. Then he fights Colby Covington. Colby Covington is the absolute worst matchup for Robbie Lawler. Wrestling heavy, volume, doesn't get tired. Then you had the Neil Magny fight. And this is where I was really disappointed in Robbie Lawler because I thought he would beat Neil Magny, but he wasn't able to do it. He wasn't able to stuff the takedowns. In any of those 4 fights is really where he had his issues with the takedown defense. And that's always been the path to beat Robbie Lawler is to take him down. And that's always been the path to beat Nick Diaz, which is to take him down. And what's great about this fight, I don't think either guy is going to be shooting for takedowns, which I absolutely love. It should be a great striking matchup, a fan-friendly matchup. I just don't see this fight going to the ground at all. You have Robbie Lawler, who's almost like a technical brawler. And what's funny is both guys are almost, they're still versions of themselves from 2004. Usually I would think, okay, 17 years has passed. You can't even tell, that they're the same fighter at this point in time. But you can see they are still the same guys they were back in 2004, but just better guys. Now, Nick Diaz, he's a complete unknown at this point, but I'm talking the last few times we've seen him. So let's get to breaking down the fight. Nick Diaz, again, is relatively unknown now because he has sat out for 6 years. Meanwhile, Robbie Lawler has been losing fights, but it's been against really good competition. And then, the Neil Magny loss, I mean, that's not the worst loss to have, but it's still not, it's not that good of a look. I could sit here and defend the Colby Covington, Ben Askren, and Rafael Dos Anjos, but the Neil Magny loss is just really, it's not a good look. Even though Neil Magny is very well rounded, he's just not the elite of the elite. So Nick Diaz, we have no idea what he's going to look like. He's sat out for 6 years. He has not fought since 2015 against Anderson Silva, but his prior self, cardio, volume, pressure. And that makes for a great fight because Robbie Lawler loves to pressure guys and throw power shots. Robbie's more crazy wild with looping punches, while Nick Diaz is more jab, follow it with the right or left hand, the 1-2. He doesn't try to get too wild. He tries to avoid the takedowns, but Robbie Lawler's not going to be shooting in on takedowns. And I think this fight is going to be 100% contested on the feet. And I think it's just a matter of which guy lands the best shot first. And the X factor I wanted to talk about in this fight that I talked about in the beginning of the video. So this is only the second ever non-main event and non-title fight to be 5 rounds. The first one was Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards. So it's funny, the Diaz brothers will be in the first two of these 5 round non-title, non-main events. And I think that's a massive factor for two reasons. One, Nick Diaz is always known for his cardio. But two, what that tells me about Nick Diaz's cardio and his shape, even after 6 years, he believes it is beneficial for him to fight 5 rounds and have a 5 round fight, which tells me he is super confident returning. He could be better than ever. We've seen guys return from layoffs and be better than ever. Even look at Brian Ortega. He got beat badly by Max Holloway, comes back after a long layoff, beats the crap out of Korean Zombie. Now he's fighting for a title on this very same card. So we've seen guys take a layoff, come back, and look better than ever. But it's just still so much of an unknown. But for him to negotiate that 5 round fight really gives me confidence that Nick Diaz is coming in shape. Because you always worry when you have a guy return after so many years. Is it just for a paycheck? Is it just to grab a paycheck? I do not think it's the case with Nick Diaz. I think Nick Diaz has a legitimate chance to win this fight. And I think we're going to see a similar Nick Diaz to what we've always seen. Now, I don't know to what extent, the level will be. He's been out for so long and, he's gotten older. But I think Nick Diaz will probably be in good shape going into this fight. Otherwise, he would not have negotiated that. And also, that 5 rounds, if it is the Nick Diaz of old, benefits Nick Diaz. He has great cardio. If he can outlast, Robbie Lawler starts to get tired. Nick Diaz with that crazy pressure style and combinations and volume, Robbie Lawler could end up like some of his past fights, sitting up against the fence, absorbing combinations, getting hit, and just not returning fire, just shelling up. We've seen that in a couple of his past fights. Now, do I think that will happen in this fight? The answer is no, but I think it's possible, but I do not think it will happen. I think the reason Robbie Lawler has been so gun shy in his last few fights is for fear of the takedown. He knew what Neil Magny was going to come in and do. He knew what Colby Covington was going to come in and try to do. He knew that Colby Covington is just throwing these short little pillow punch shots to set up the takedown. And that's not going to be the case in this Nick Diaz fight. Robbie Lawler knows that Nick Diaz is coming in and is going to try to take his head off and knock him out. So as far as my prediction goes, I am going to go Robbie Lawler 2nd round TKO. And for me, the main factor was the time off. I don't know if Nick Diaz is going to have the same timing that he's always had. He's been out for so long. I know he's training, but I just can't. It's a relative unknown. I just can't pick based off an unknown. I think Nick Diaz has a shot, but again, he's been out for so long, I can't pick him. Robbie Lawler, even though he's been losing, he's been active. He's been fighting legit competition, and he has the octagon time. He's not been sitting out for all this time. I think the fight's going to be contested on the feet. I think Nick Diaz is going to come out taunting. I think he's going to come out pressuring. And I think Robbie Lawler is going to throw back heavy power shots. He's going to look to dodge the punches and counter, rock Nick Diaz and knock him out or TKO him, probably drop him and TKO him in the 2nd round is going to be my guess. There's going to be a feeling out process early. At this point in time, he's been out for so long. He has to get his time. He's going to be feeling him out early in that 1st round, in my opinion. I could be dead wrong. This could be a Diego Sanchez, Clay Guida, but I just don't think Nick Diaz is going to come out full guns a-blazing just because he's been out for so long. I think he's going to come out. I think he's going to land a couple 1-2s. I think Robbie Lawler is going to eat some shots, but I think he's going to throw back heavy power shots and beat up Nick Diaz and finish him via TKO in the 2nd round. I also think Robbie Lawler, if he's smart, he comes out with a heavy leg kick game plan. The Diaz brothers have always been in that classic boxing stance, and they're heavy on that lead leg. Robbie Lawler can start chopping that leg early and often, and I think that will be Robbie Lawler's strategy. I think he will kick the leg. I think he will move. I think he'll get his timing, and then I think he'll eventually explode, land counters, and TKO Nick Diaz, and I think this will be a great fight. But if Nick Diaz somehow pulls this off, he has great options in front of him. I think he'll probably fight either Jorge Masvidal next or even a potential Kamaru Usman title shot, which I would be disturbed with. You shouldn't come in, beat Robbie Lawler, and get a title shot. But again, I think Robbie Lawler is going to win 2nd-round TKO. Leave your prediction in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. Are you picking Nick Diaz or are you picking Robbie Lawler? This is a crazy rematch 17 years later. Make sure to like the video if you guys enjoy these videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.